Welcome. 14th of September, Vielle, Google Hangout, CPD Accredited. We're on YouTube. You can watch us later. We've got podcasts, so you can download and listen to us on the train on the way home. And you can sign up to receive emails. And you can also sign up to receive on-screen notifications. Just turn someone's sound down. Now, it's been a long time since we actually had a podcast because we closed down for the summer. But we're here and back with the team. Actually, Scotland have got the day off. But other than Scotland, we have Dale Henry over here.
Hi, everyone.
We have Ed Jeffs.
Afternoon.
And we have guests Daniel Montlake and
good afternoon,
Sivan Gelb. And we're going to tell you more about them later. All right. So we're going to introduce the guests later. So that's laying the scene. So we all had a nice summer. Everyone had a nice summer. And now we're back. There's a bit of echo. There's a bit of echo. I'm going to turn you guys down in your office. So if you want to say anything, I'll just shout or wave. Right. Let's go through what's happened in the last few months. Now, everyone thinks that the market's been really slow over the summer, but actually, that's not the case. At Vielle, we've actually been very busy. So, who's going to show us what we've been doing? Who's going through our sales?
I'm happy to kick off.
Right, Dale, you're going to go through the sales, yeah?
But I was going to just give a quick overview of some of the sales we've done over the summer. Just some recent activity our end. Oh,
are you muted, Dale?
Can you hear me? Hello? Yeah?
Oh, you know why, Dale?
Why?
You're logged in at this.
Am I?
Anyway, doesn't matter. So I'm Neil, and this actually this is also Neil. Right, so Dale Neil, you're going to go through our sales.
I'll just let everyone know what we've been up to over the summer, which has actually been quite a busy summer for us. We've managed to sell a number of properties over August. So just quickly running through, we have exchanged on a car showroom investment in Liverpool, which was a Fiat showroom let to Stoneacre with about 11 years unexpired, which we sold for Schroders at a figure of 2.2 million, which was 6.28%, which was acquired by another institution. We have also recently sold a retail investment in Northampton Town Centre, let to Ladbrokes, for another 8 years, which actually failed to sell previously by one of the auction houses. We quoted 900 and achieved over asking 915,000, 7.75%. We've sold a multi-let investment up in Gateshead, which was a trade counter industrial retail site, which we sold for 2.9 million, 7.75%. And what else? We've just recently sold a co-op investment down in Ivybridge with 10 years unexpired, which we got 6.5% for, 2.73 million. And the guys up in Scotland have also been busy over the summer. They've sold a couple of retail investments, one in Irvine and one in Montrose. So, yeah, despite the market being quiet, it has been a busy summer for us. In terms of current sales, I'll hand over to Ed, who will just give a quick run through of the sales we've brought to the market, we've got in the market now, or brought to the market in the last week or so. So I'll hand over to Ed.
Thanks. Yeah. But so basically, we've got a few sales in the market at the moment. First of all, we've got a food store investment in Poole Town Centre. It's let to Sainsbury's with over 5 years remaining on the lease. And we're quoting £1.3 million, which shows a net initial yield of 6%. We've also got a bank investment on the High Street in Fort William. Let to Bank of Scotland with 13 years left on the lease. We're asking £850,000, which shows a net initial yield of 5.75%. In Taymouth, Devon, we have a town centre retail investment let to Subway. 4.5 years left on the lease. We're asking £350,000 for it, and that shows a net initial yield of 6.9%. We also have a multi-let high street retail investment Air Town Centre, which is let to Burger King and The Works. We're asking 1.1 million for it, which reflects a net initial yield of 8.32%. Finally, in Trowbridge Town Centre, we have a co-op funeral care investment with 5 years remaining on the lease. We're asking £255,000, and that shows a net yield of 6%.
Back with me. Okay. Unmute. Right. Yeah, we've got a bit of feedback. I think we've got a bit of a feedback issue. Do you know what I think it is? I think it's because Mr. Henry has logged in twice. Never mind. Hold on. Can you hear me, guys? Ed, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, right. Let's go through some of the news, shall we? So we've got new sales coming up. That's the first thing I want to mention to you, just so people are aware. We've got sales coming up in what's going on? We've got sales coming up in West Ealing, a shop in West Ealing. So if anyone's interested, let us know. Near Crossrail, we've got a new roadside retail unit coming up in the northwest. Office in Colchester, retail block in Peterlee, little shop in York, etc., etc. So if you want to buy property, you know where to come, because we've got plenty. It's coming out our ears. Right, let's talk about main news and what's going on in the market. Guys, I'm gonna sort of switch you on and off wave, because there seems to be some feedback from your computer for some reason. So if you need to say anything, and I haven't put you on speaker, just wave, all right? So we know. Right, let's go on to some news, and we can all talk about the news. Right, the main news I thought was quite interesting. Let me share a page with everyone who's watching. So as we probably all saw today, John Lewis's reported a 99% crash in profits, and Dominic Raab, whatever his name is, just said that it had nothing to do with Brexit. What a load of nonsense. I think that I don't normally like to talk politics, but I'm going to talk politics. I think that Brexit is the biggest disaster for the property market that I can ever remember, and I think is going to be a nightmare going forward. Now, it probably won't be as bad as everyone thinks it might be, but it's causing such uncertainty that everyone is very worried, and it has affected the general property market without question, in the investment market that we work in. Having said that, Singer Vielle have been very busy, and we are still selling property. So people are clearly looking for a hedge and are still clearly looking to buy property as a counter against the issue of Brexit. The other thing that I thought we should mention is that Mark Carney today said that house prices would crash by a third if there was a no-deal Brexit. Well, if ever you want to cause a housing market crash, you just need someone like Mark Carney of the Bank of England to tell everyone it's about to crash, so indeed it does crash. I think that was a complete nonsense of him saying anything. It doesn't help anybody. I don't know why I did it. So as you can probably guess, I am no fan of Brexit, and I don't mind saying it. I never talk politics, but I do think it's causing all of these issues. And what do you guys think in Queen Anne Street?
Well, I'm certainly no fan of Brexit. It's hit us pretty hard from a perspective. We were dealing a lot of overseas transactions, and which has seemed to have almost dried up completely. So I'm certainly no fan of Brexit. I think it's had a negative impact on business confidence, and I think people are just sitting tight, waiting to see what happens. I think that's been the case for sort of the best part of 2 years now. So yeah. I mean,
why do you think have interest? Your foreign buyers, what part of the world?
Well, we had a big influx from Greece when their economy sort of tanked. So they were sort of frantically trying to buy up in London. But I also had a large market from the States. They were sort of looking to London, looking to the property market in London. I think they've pretty much taken a wait and see what happens. they initially received quite a bit of a boost when the pound collapsed as well, so that gave them a bit of an incentive. But since then, I think they've all sat tight and trying to see how things move on. And I just think it's the uncertainty. I think it's all to do with the uncertainty. I think once we know what we're doing, where we're going, I'm hoping that things will start to pick up. And,
yeah, you know what? I think it's always helpful and useful talking to lawyers who are at the coalface, because actually you've got the clients who've actually got the purse strings, you know, and they're the ones buying.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, I said to you, we've actually had a very busy August, and even the things that Dale and Ed have been talking about that we've recently put in the market, we've had people moving very quickly. So people still see property as a hedge. I'm slightly cynical about this view that people are buying properties in the UK because the pound is low, because who's to say it's not going to go lower? And unfortunately, maybe the pound has reached its level that it will be at for a while. I hope not, but you never know. But so I think Brexit is a big problem for us. But like I said, I cannot understand why Mark Carney had to open his mouth today on the papers. I just don't see what the benefit is. It causes nothing but if you're about, let me tell you, if I was about to exchange on my house today, I would be walking round to the vendor's house with the newspaper in my hand, saying, "Look, how much discount are you going to give me?"
Yeah, but can I say, I do think that it is. Today there's quite a lot of media spin. I'm not sure they have sort of twisted it a bit in terms of what he said, because I don't think actually what he said is anything too. I think he came out and said the same thing in November, because they do these stress tests all the time, don't they? Or every so often to ensure that if there was a doomsday scenario, the banking system can withstand, you know, worst case extreme financial tests. So I think they said in November that you know, the worst case there'd be a 30% fall, but it just they've jumped on it, the media, you know, just given that the nearer we get to Brexit. And I think it's really not. It's based on a complete doomsday scenario, so which we could be heading towards, but. Anyway, I do think they have spun it a bit. That's
okay. All right. Well, you may be right, but what he could have done is come out and actually said something positive. But the other news over the summer actually is, again, I don't normally talk politics, but it's had such an impact on the property industry, is that I think that the Tory party are in a complete mess. And I think the Labour Party are in a complete mess. And I think that there's ground for a central new party which could arise and hopefully bring some stability, which would actually be very nice to see, to be honest with you. I mean, if you think Brexit is causing uncertainty for the property market, if Mr. Corbyn were to walk into number 10, God help us. I think it would be the biggest disaster in the property market in my lifetime. There'll be no more Google Hangouts because I wouldn't be here. So I don't know. That's what I think. Anyway, let's not worry too much about that. The other thing I wanted to mention actually in terms of news, which I think people might find quite interesting, is let me show you guys something. The government, the Law Society rather, just a few weeks ago, brought out a consultation paper on the execution of documents by electronic signature. And this is very, very recent, 21st of August. I don't know if you guys saw that. Did you see that?
I have seen that. Yeah.
So I mean, it's very interesting because I'm very into electronic signatures and the impact upon the property market with our click-to-purchase system and how we use that to sell buildings. So it's very interesting that the Law Commission have actually brought something out. And if anybody wants a link to that, just get in touch. And you'll find it pretty easily, actually. But if you need a link, get in touch. I'll send it to you. But what's interesting, their conclusion from the Law Commission, whilst it's a consultation paper, is they don't think the law needs changing when it comes to electronic signing of contracts. And they're asking for people's view. And they are talking about things like IDAS and advanced electronic signatures and qualified electronic signatures. I think it's really quite interesting because it just shows how we're moving into the future. But that's a whole nother topic, but it's worth looking up if people aren't aware of it. But I thought that was quite interesting to see it come out. Right, let's talk to our guests. Let's talk about core sustainability, and what is core sustainability? I'm going to show everyone your website as you let me just show everyone, they can find it. Nice website, by the way, very nice, very colorful, if I may say. Dan,
Very much.
are you there? Seems to have frozen.
We tried to make it bright. Can you hear us okay? We got a bit of delay here.
Yeah, I think your line's gone slightly, but
okay. I'll come forward to the camera a little bit.
That's better.
Can you hear us now?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Neil. So I am Daniel Montlake from Core Sustainability. I am the director and founder of Core Sustainability. Just a bit of background to myself. I qualified in 1999 with an estates management degree. I then went to Savoy Stewart, who are a firm of chartered surveyors. I worked there for several years. Stayed there, became a partner. In 2009, I decided to leave Savoy Stewart and set up my own energy company, which the first introduction into it was basically undertaking commercial EPC assessments. Obviously, my background was commercial property, so it was pretty much an easy slipstream in for me to understand commercial property. I then set up Core Sustainability, and what Core Sustainability are they're a niche practice which is involved in sustainability and energy reduction. We're very much looking at the government legislation. There's quite a lot of government legislation. Funny, you were talking about Brexit before, and obviously a lot of the legislation is derived from the EU. However, it has been enshrined now into UK law, so a lot of this is all still moving forward. We're looking at the global targets, and also basically my own general desire, maybe not to save the planet for ourselves, but maybe for my children and their children in the future. It's quite something that I'm quite into. We do have a range of services that we offer, but cut me off if you get too bored of this running through them. But
no, I didn't know part of your service was saving the planet. That's quite impressive.
Well, they do call me Superman as well, but okay, we'll add that later on.
We don't have that on our list at Singer Vielle of one of our features, actually. We should think about that, guys.
I think maybe wearing your underpants on the outside of your shirt and tie, your trousers and tie might be
okay. We'll take that under consideration. Yes.
Okay. All right. So just in terms of what we offer now, we offer commercial and residential EPCs for existing buildings and new buildings. We offer SAP assessments, which is on the new build. We offer energy statements, which go with planning, where you need to improve your building in terms of energy efficiency ahead of building regulations. We deal with behavioural change, so we go into companies and we advise them on how to make how their staff should work to make them more energy efficient. Simple things such as switching your lights off all the way through to technical implementations. We deal with the Energy Saving Opportunity Scheme, which is just about to come round. About 10,000 odd companies meet the qualification criteria, and we need to audit these companies in terms of energy, reduce their carbon assessments. We deal with ISO 50001, which is the environmental standard to try and lower carbon emissions and energy usage. And finally, to tie it all in, since we're involved in the property industry, we deal with land registry, compliant plans, including lease plans, surveys. So that's a little bit about core sustainability. Anyway. Okay,
right. Dan, Sivan, do you want to tell us about Michael Conn Goldsobel? Michael Conn Goldsobel.
We're sort of a small West End practice, a law firm.
We've been around for nearly 60 years. Well, not me personally, but in various forms we've been around for about. We're a full service firm, so my main focus is on property. So the largest department is the property department. We do a lot of corporate work, sort of high-end corporate work as well, and a contentious department, sort of a litigation contentious. Again, most of the corporate and the litigation tends to be property focused. I've been a partner there for about 6 or 7 years now. I am a property lawyer, mainly focusing on corporate property. So I'm a lot of landlord and tenant work, transactional work as well, a full variety of.
Okay, so right, so if you want a lawyer in the West End, we're going to introduce you to Sivan. If you want to save the planet, we're going to introduce you to Dan. Right, so let's talk about Dan and Sivan are going to tell us all about something called the minimum energy efficiency standards. Do you know what I felt a bit like Ali G then. You know when he says that at the beginning, doesn't he? He says, I'm going to talk about, right. So we're going to talk about minimum energy efficiency standards, March 2018. What is it? And what does it do? Guys?
Correct. They came in as April 2018, the minimum energy efficiency standards. And what they are is that basically we've all seen, and hopefully you guys and people who are listening to us have come across EPCs, the energy performance certificates, before. These EPCs arrived, and they generally use your dishwasher and washing machine from an A to any considered a tape, not that looking at any agents in particular, but general feeling is that a lot of it can be considered red tape. However, the government has committed to.
Oh, you're frozen.
Improve.
Guys, you're frozen.
Carbon. Do need your.
You know what? Somebody.
Can you not hear us at all?
Can you hear us?
Someone's obviously downloading a film in your office. That's better. You're back. You're back. Go back.
Okay.
Go back to.
All right.
What is it, and why is it so important?
So the regulations mean that if you have an EPC as an FOG, you cannot currently let out your property under a new transaction starting from April 2018. Now that has a huge impact on the property market, bearing in mind that some properties may be unlettable, subject to certain exemptions. So we have a real problem here that actually if a landlord has a building and he can't let the property, it's going to have an impact not only on his rental, but also on the capital value as well of that property. Now, there are a huge amount of, I know we're going to discuss hopefully shortly on it, but as of April 2000, hammer comes down, and it means that all existing tenancies, which are F&G rated EPCs, will no longer be able to be let in the market and could potentially be subject to some penalties, which I think we may discuss later on.
Yeah. So how do EPC ratings work?
So the way it happens, I mean, a lot of people think, oh yeah, there's a terrible old shed there, tin pot shed. That's going to be a terrible rated building. However, EP made up with what actually goes inside of an EP, what actually goes inside of a property more than anything else. So actually, you could have a terrible property and actually improve it to a reasonable level through doing certain internal installations to it. Some of them are quite cost effective, such as lighting changes can have a dramatic effect on EPC outcome, heating, for example, a number of factors really, but EPCs derive from undertaking an inspection, modelling it in the 3D software, creating that model with all the inputs put in from every facet that needs to go in, such as HVACs and hot water, insulation levels, building ages, etc. You put this into the program, and it will reveal a rating. It will spin the wheel and reveal a rating to you, which is comparable against other buildings of the said age and what's expected against it. So you'll come out with a rating of A to G as we've said with F and G, the worst ratings.
Okay. And what was interesting, because I read an article that you guys had written, and in fact, again, if people should actually have a look at this article. It's on your website, actually. It's on the Core Sustainability website. It's called The Stick That Became a Carrot. And what was interesting when you were talking about EPCs is the effect it's going to have on values of properties going forward. And what happens if your property is downgraded, although it's currently graded okay at the moment? I think it might be quite helpful if you could explain to people what happens to a landlord and a tenant who've taken a lease and suddenly find that their rating assessment has changed, because I think it's got quite a significant impact.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of legal implications for it as well. I mean, one aspect which I've written quite a lot on is the impacts on things like rent review. I mean, what will then happen if you've got an existing lease, it's come up for rent review, we've got the standard sort of rent review clause that it's open market rents, assuming that the property could be let. If the tenant then suddenly turns around and says, well, hold on a minute, you've got an F and a G rated property, you can't actually let this property in the open market, what would then happen on the rent review? Could the tenant, for example, argue that there should be no increase in the rent? And that's matters which I think are going to make this very, very tactical, how landlords and tenants sort of view this. I don't think so much is going to be on the initial stage of the transaction. I think things like rent review, break clauses, things like that are going to have a major sort of implications. Also, how would a valuer, a rent reviewer, surveyor, how would he value a property, the same property as the one next door, if one's got an A-rated and one's got an F and a G? So you're going to come into it. So it's not just for new lettings, although the legislation currently only applies to new lettings. It's going to have a major impact on existing leases, and certainly older style leases where the draftsman who drafted the lease wouldn't have anticipated this type of legislation coming in. So I can see in the future a lot of sort of tactical battles between landlords and tenants.
So I'm assuming at the moment that if it's an old lease and your property doesn't meet the required regulatory standards, the landlord's got no right to go in and do any works to the premises because he's let it to the tenant. The tenant's responsible for the property under an FRI lease. So the landlord can't actually improve even if he wanted to. So
correct, absolutely correct. But at this stage, the landlord wouldn't be in breach of the regulations, because it's only on the granting of the lease where he falls foul of the regulations. So at the moment, the landlord doesn't have an issue, but where he could potentially have an issue, as I mentioned a few moments ago, is on things like rent review and on lease renewal.
Well, that's exactly. The tenant surveyor, so the tenant argues I'm not increasing, there's no market for my property. Meanwhile, the landlord can't do anything about it to put it into a state which gives it a proper rating.
Correct.
Has there been any cases about this yet?
Not yet, and which we are eagerly looking forward to, because as lawyers, that's what we sort of pays the bills. But we're looking forward to that type of thing. So I think there will be a lot of contentious work over this, but nothing's yet been tried. So at the moment, it's very speculative how the courts will interpret it. But it certainly raises a lot of interesting arguments, a lot of interesting possible tactics to be used by both landlords and tenants. And those professional advisors, not just solicitors, surveyors as well, who are aware of the regulations, can actually really manipulate them to use in their favour, depending on who they act for.
Okay. Further to what Sivan's saying, Sivan and I have been speaking around the country at the RICS events, and what we found is we were approached by a couple of tenants, a couple of agents, rent review surveyors acting for the tenants. And basically what they said to me was, Dan, my tenants are in the building at the moment. The building has a C rating, but it was undertaken some years ago. would you go in, because we don't believe it's a C rating anymore, would you go in and look at the EPC rating for us, what it should be? So we went in, we do a draft assessment, it comes out actually as a G rating. Now the tenant then turns around to the landlord and takes the G rating to him and says, Mr. Landlord, if you don't give us help us with a decent rent review here, I'm going to slap this G rating on your building and you won't be able to let the building. So what are you going to do about it? How are we going to play this, Mr. Landlord? So there's all these different tactics basically that we've been speaking about. So we're doing a lot of draft EPC work at the moment, which is not just purely about transactional, but is also looking about where the properties currently sit, because this is the biggest problem we've got. An EPC rating lasts for 10 years. Now, if you did a valuation, would you rely on a valuation from 8 years ago? No, you wouldn't. This is a face value at this moment and this time. So, for instance, if you don't mind me giving you another quick example, we were asked to undertake an inspection of an office building in Euston. Certificate was undertaken in 2009. Client said to us, Dan, I've refurbished one of the floors here. I said, okay. So we went in, we did the assessment on it. Yeah, it was updated in certain ways. We looked at the EPC rating, it came out as a G. So that floor had gone from a C to a G. Now, we only did it in draft format. The landlord said to us, whatever you do, my short-term play is to sell this building, so I don't want a G rating on my building. So it's great, I know that you've got a G rating there, sat there, Dan, but at the end of the day, don't put it on because I've got 2 years left on my EPC. He then maybe sold that building later down the line, but buyer beware, they don't know that sat behind that C rating on that building is a G rating with a huge amount of inherent liability. And we're seeing this more and more and more. So actually, what Sivan's doing, and he's advising his clients upon transactions to undertake a new EPC with a recognised energy assessor, because what we're finding is, you know, we are chartered surveyors, we have to respond to the RICS, we've got regulations in place, we have huge indemnity insurance that we've taken out separately, which many assessors don't have. So if we give the wrong recommendations, then obviously we've got that liability, we've got that insurance behind us as well. But in terms of what we found is we've picked up so many cases where EPC assessors have gone in, done the rating incorrectly, given a G. We've actually been in, and because we spend a lot of time on site and we take down absolutely every detail, we've actually managed to improve those ratings to a higher level, a D or an E, just by literally going back inside the property again and re-rating it. And the reason is because we have a duty to our clients to make sure that we get the best rating for them. So a lot of EPC assessors will run round. It's been a market where it's been dominated by who can do this the cheapest, whereas now where it actually means something in terms of capital value, people are actually spending money on it now because they don't want to get stuck with a building which is an F and G, where in the space of spending maybe a few £100 extra, of actually using someone who's going to do a quality job for them, they're going to get the proper answer from it.
Yeah. Okay. Add on to that as well, just sort of put a legal angle onto it. I, as a sort of a rule, I almost completely disregard any EPC which is carried out pre-2012. I mean, anything like that is just not worth the paper it's written on. It just gives you no indication as to what the true value of the building is. And the worry we have, obviously, is clients going in, buying a building thinking they've got an A or a B, which is sort of 7-8-year-old EPC, when they go to renew the EPC, finding out it's actually an F and a G. So the golden rule we have is literally anything 2012, forget. But you know, even things, unless it's sort of 2 or 3 years, we certainly would advise our clients to just get a full understanding of what the actual rating is lying behind the current EPC. So I think it's not just on lettings; it's also on transactions that are.
I got a question.
The banks are getting really keen on this as well now.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
I've got a question. I've got your screeners are frozen, so I'm showing people your lovely pictures as you're talking. All right.
Oh, thank you.
So my question is, what happens if a landlord owns a property and it comes to the end of the lease and it's got a bad rating, but it's uneconomic to spend money on it to make it to put it up to a C? Is it a C it needs to be? Is it, what's the lowest it has to be?
It needs to be minimum level of E.
So what if it's uneconomic to spend the money? Are they just not allowed to just have to sit vacant?
There are certain exemptions. I think Dan probably you'll give a brief example what the exemptions are, but you can't simply, unless you can comply with the exemptions listed, you can't simply refuse to bring your property up simply because it's uneconomical. That's one of the burdens of owning a property. There is the one exemption that may well apply is the 7-year payback, which I think it's basically if the cost of carrying out that works cannot be recovered over the next 7 years via the energy savings, you can then apply for an exemption. But if you fail to meet the criteria for the 7-year payback, you can't simply say this is too costly for me. I'm afraid that's one of the problems of owning property in this country.
We've got a perfect example of that. I've got a client who recently owned a West End property. They had a 3-4 story building in there, and the lighting was pretty ordinary. We went in, it was a G rating. The lighting alone would not take it to, we came back and we did what's called an EPC improvement audit or report, and we showed the client by doing certain steps they'll get to the rating that they need to get to. Client went ahead, priced that out. It's shown in this instance that the lighting itself will not get the property up to the level it was required. They'd have to install air conditioning. Now the client said to us, Dan, I want to go for an exemption on this because that cost is going to be thousands of pounds, and I don't believe it's going to make any, you know, it's unviable for us to do, and we're not going to meet the 7-year payback rule where it pays itself back. So we went through the exercise. We went out for quotations. We did the actual calculations on file, and we actually found it would pay itself back in 4 years' time. So unfortunately, the client had to undertake those installations, whether he liked it or not, in order to let that property. So it's part of the property world now. There are these inherent liabilities.
Okay, you have to do it. All right, I've got a question from Rob Simmons. Rob says, post-Brexit, what will be the impact on EPCs?
Well, the EPCs, the regulations are all now UK law. They've all now been adopted by Parliament, passed through Parliament. So I don't think Brexit will have any impact on this. I think it's MEES is here and it's here to stay, and I believe we're all going to have to comply with. I mean, the current government are quite keen to, well, should we say, to be seen to be sort of moving towards a green economy, and we are always the ones sort of hoping to be sort of the market leaders. I don't think that they would certainly they wouldn't revoke the MEES regulations. I don't think Brexit is going to have any impact whatsoever on it. It may slow down future legislation, as I'm sure the government's got a little bit more important things to worry about, but it certainly won't have an impact on the current regulations.
Okay, I got a question. Dal.
I've got a question from a transactional. I've got a question from a transactional perspective. So the law says you cannot sell or let a building if you've got an EPC rating lower than E. Presumably the transaction can still take place, but you'll just be subject to penalties. They can't actually prevent the transaction taking place, I presume.
Right, I think you're cutting out slightly now.
Oh. Okay, so just briefly, if you ignore, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? Oh, they've gone.
Are they gone?
You there, Dan?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so if you ignore the regulations and you go ahead and transact, you sell a property which has got a G rating. Presumably they can't prevent the transaction from occurring. You just get hit with penalties or fines.
Yeah, I think firstly, I think a lot of it's going to be self-regulated. I think as lawyers, I don't think a lawyer can knowingly complete a transaction. At the moment, it's just lettings. It's only on lettings. It's not an actual sale. You can own your own building, and if it doesn't comply. But on lettings, I don't think a lawyer can knowingly breach the regulations. I mean, in effect, I consider you're falling foul of the laws about leases knowingly that it breaches regulation. So you've got a lot of the self-regulation stuff. But absolutely, if they go ahead and deal with it, let's say it gets past that stage, then the penalties are severe. It's 150,000
pounds. Yeah.
So it's per issue, really. So per property, in reality, yeah, you can it can be combined upwards. The problem you've got on a transactional thing, Dale, is that if you're selling a building, G rating on it, and say it's a short term, say it's got short term left on the lease, whoever's take that into consideration, that possibly they're going to have to spend money to bring the building up to standard before they're able to re-let that building again. So it is going to hit the transactional sales. I mean, longer term leases maybe not. So you know, EPCs have only got a 10-year period, and a lot of those are already coming up for renewal because they date back to 2008. So really, it's about getting your ducks in order earlier on so that you've got a case to state. So if you're selling a building, my advice would be, if you were selling a building with a short-term lease on it, have an EPC assessor, such as Core Sustainability, to go into your property, the issues are, and say, okay, advise back to yourselves and say, we are selling this building, but I want you to know that the only reason it's failing and lighting, so really the cost is a few £100 or a few £1,000 to replace it, and you're going to get to where you want to get to with it, because C and G is going to just, the eyes are just going to light up thinking there's a real issue here, when in many cases there may not be a real issue. So it's better for you to be sort of information so that you can speak to potential purchasers about what those issues are. Just one thing cannot be underestimated is the banks, the banking finance. I mean, we had a situation pre-Mies last year whereby we were selling a property. Nothing, the property would have failed Mies, although Mies hadn't come into force yet. I think it was an F.
They've gone. Are you there?
Wrong with selling it.
Hello?
Hello? Can you hear us?
Very badly. Can they stop watching that movie again?
It's
all right. I've got a great question for you. All right. Can you hear us? I've got a great question.
We can hear you fine.
Okay. It must be something. I don't know what it. Maybe you haven't paid your bill. Anyway, I've got a question for you. All right. Have residential properties got to have an EPC, haven't they? Yeah. Okay. So here's a real life example. Here's a real life question for you. I hope you can hear us and we can get a response. So my house is a 1920s house in North London, and I'm thinking of doing a loft conversion. All right, because it's got a 1960s loft up there with a 1960s staircase and no insulation. So in the summer it's boiling and in the winter it's freezing up there. So we're about to sort of try and do some work to get the thing looking nice. So do I have to do the work? Because clearly, I mean, without me, I would imagine it would have a rubbish rating if I was selling my house. But do I have to do the work? And number two, will the government pay for it?
Okay, residential EPCs and the legislation is very different to commercial.
Oh, you're back. We can see you again.
Hooray! So it's very completely different to the commercial. It's a bit of a cop-out in the residential field that there are exemptions that almost, if you have to put your hand in your pocket to pay for things, you can apply for an exemption. So if there are no grants out there at the moment, or if there are no ways of green funding this, then you are allowed to apply for an exemption to be at an EPC rating that is F and G, as long as you make a declaration online for this. They are thinking about increasing this figure to £2,500. But in the scheme of things, residential is very easy to make compliant. They're very basic factors. You've not got any ventilation.
You've not seen my loft.
So you've not got really any high tech kit up there, which you do in the commercial. So it's only really boilers and radiators and lighting, and insulation and stuff that's going to make a difference. It's very limited in what you actually need to do. So in many instances, and we're dealing with a lot of clients at the moment where we've made references to a few measures that will actually take them to where they need to get to. And even though they could literally be exempt from it, they think it's best to comply.
But do you think
maybe the tenants?
Do you think it's going to affect house sales?
It's hard to say, because I think there's greater factors affecting house sales at this moment in time to be taken into account. So I think it's probably down the line, but I do envisage if we take like for like, and one house costs, I don't know, £100 to run and it's an A rating, and another house takes £1,000 to run because it's a G rating, and the houses are side by side, the cost of occupation may have an impact on what their mortgage repayments are going to be, because they could save £900, etc. per month. We're talking obviously bigger figures here, but I do see it very much in the commercial sector. When we have an office building side by side with another, and one's an A rated and one's, say, an F or a G rating, we are going to have a discrepancy in rents down the line, because I think the tenant would much prefer to be in a more environmentally friendly, economical building rather than in an older, dilapidated.
The impact is going to be far greater in the commercial sector. I think, in my personal view, I think people will buy houses because that's where they want to live. I'm not sure how I mean, it will have an impact, but I'm not sure how much an impact it will have. That's just my personal view. I think it's much more, the actual legislation is much tougher on the commercial. It can have much more of an impact.
Okay, so can I just sort of, it's been very helpful, very interesting. Can I just sort of round up actually on this side? So in terms of you guys helping people who want some advice about energy efficiency and the, what's it called again? The memes, they should contact us, or we'll put them in touch with you guys if you need to, if you need some legal advice, or you need some actual advice in terms of your buildings. In fact, I don't mind telling everyone we use Daniel a lot when we're selling property, and he's great. So he's always very helpful. So if you want any help, if any agents out there need help in selling properties and you need an EPC rating, Daniel's your man. And we haven't yet worked with Sivan, but anyone who's working in Queen Anne Street is good with me, because I worked there for years. Right, can I change subject now? I'd like to talk about something else. And other than EPCs, I want to talk about something else. And everyone can throw in, everyone can add. So as people know, I'm very into technology and I'm very into blockchain. And I wrote an article which was published in the Property Week last Friday, which was headed, "The fast emergence of blockchain technology could kill off the traditional ballroom auction." And I just thought it was worth explaining myself why I wrote this article. And I wasn't trying to do it to go head to head with our competitors who are the auctioneers, but it was a genuine reason to explain why the ballroom auction will not exist. And it will not exist within, say, 2 years. In 2 years' time, there will not be ballroom auctions. I'm absolutely convinced of it. Now, the reason I would have always said before is that technology is changing so fast that people don't need to go to a ballroom anymore. They can bid on their phone. They can bid. They can. The technology is such you don't need to be there anymore. You can be bidding in Australia and an auction in London, and it's very transparent if it's all online, because you're bidding with same people in the same environment. If you talk to an auctioneer, they will tell you people love going to auctions because they can see what's going on. Well, that's simply not true. We get loads of buyers who come to us, and private investors find the auction room incredibly intimidating. Plus, they have to hang around all day long waiting for people to bid waiting for their lot to come up, and the chances are they won't get it anyway. So the people who love going to auctions are the dealers. If you go to an auction house, you'll see at the back of the room the dealers who chatting amongst themselves, and they love an auction because they think the fact that dealers are there is proof that they think they can buy something cheaply. Now, that wasn't why I think ballrooms are going to close. I think the reason ballrooms are going to close is because blockchain technology is going to close it. Now, in the world that we are now living in, people demand transparency, accountability, audit trails more and more than they ever did before. Now, blockchain technology is the ultimate in providing trust and transparency in any transaction, because once data goes into a blockchain ledger, that data cannot be changed. So if you are selling a building, what we do at Click to Purchase is we move that contract into a blockchain ledger as absolute proof that that transaction has occurred. If anybody were in theory able to hack in and change a system, the blockchain ledger would prove that the transaction was at the original price. So I believe that auction rooms cannot provide that level of transparency. They cannot provide audit trails because the bidding's all verbal. And therefore, I think that the very reason that ballrooms will not exist any longer is not to do with the fact that people find them intimidating and it's easy to bid on your phone. It's because they cannot provide an accountable audit trail. And I believe that blockchain technology, which is coming in at such a rapid pace into all areas of our lives, is the fundamental reason why people demand accountability and demand audit trails. And hence, the ballroom auction will no longer exist. And I'm absolutely convinced. And if anybody wants to place a bet with me, I will take bets all day long that in 2 years' time, there will not be ballroom auctions. What do you think of that? You got any clients who sell at auction?
I've certainly got a few who buy at auction. We've got a few who sell at auction as well. I agree with a lot of what you're saying as well. I think it's. I also think it's something about auctions rooms. It's very much the. I wouldn't say old-fashioned, but it's very much. A lot of people just don't like the idea of an auction. They haven't got the time to just go there, sit there for half a day, and then make their bids. I think people generally prefer the technology and actually deal with it online. And I agree. I mean, I was actually having this conversation, something similar, a couple of months ago with a client as well, who said something similar to what you were saying, that they just don't see the point in auctions. They just simply think it's all going to be online. Not necessarily because of the technology, but more because he thinks that's what people's preferences will be. But I think auction properties, I agree with you. I think it's a bit of a myth as well. You get great deals at auction. I'm not totally convinced that's always true as well. And a lot of my clients tell me that as well. I think you sometimes get more problematic properties at auction, but I don't think you necessarily get good deals. But yeah, I agree. I think it will. It's a dying way of selling, I think.
Well, what's interesting, and Dale and Ed will back me up on this, the thing about auctions is they bring speed and certainty to the sales process. That's why people go. Click to Purchase, the online way that you can buy a building by private treaty, brings speed and certainty to the sales process. And it's simple as that. So if you can find a process that gets past the auction room, if the auction room is no longer a place where you as a vendor can get maximum price, then why would you possibly go? The only reason you go is for speed and certainty. Click to Purchase. We've done 200 million of sales online now, where somebody literally makes an offer, presses a button, and the deal gets exchanged like that. So why do you need to go to an auction? In fact, if you've got any clients, I happen to mention this, but any clients who would like to learn about the transparency and accountability that Click to Purchase and blockchain can offer, we'd love to come and talk to you. Put them in touch. And if they want the most money for their sales as well. Right, so it's nearly 2 o'clock. I think. Any other business? Anyone else? No?
No, don't think so.
You don't want to mention, nobody wants to talk about Diane Abbott on the tube yesterday? No? I saw that one. Okay, guys. Well, look, that's it then. That's it. I think we're done. Ed, anything? Anything? As a youngster?
Well, I was going to ask about.
Thanks very much for having us.
I was going to ask, but it might take a while, about the energy saving opportunities, given how that's different from the EPCs, and it's basically for corporates, is it? This is kind of what I understood.
So ESOS, the Energy Saving Opportunity Scheme, it comes around every 4 years. The first cycle was 4 years ago. We were actively involved in it. And what it does is it takes certain companies, not their assets, but well, we'll come to the assets in a second. It doesn't just revolve around property. What it does is it looks at them based on their financial situation, see if they qualify, or the amount of staff. Now, if these companies qualify, there's roughly about 10,000 companies. They then need to undertake a full audit on their properties, their transportation, which could be cars, it could be predominantly cars, it could be vans, it could be trains, whatever they use their workforce for, and also industrial process. And what we have to do, from our point of view, as assessors is we need to actually look at that company, and we need to audit 90% of their energy consumption. So that most of the time that tends to be their buildings and their transportation. Then we look at their buildings and we create individual reports for them about how they can improve those properties, where they currently are in those properties, looking at how they can move those properties forward in terms of energy efficiency. The recommendations include renewables, and then the transport thing. We look at how many cars they use. Could they upgrade different cars? Could they put their drivers on safe driving certain driving courses to make the car more efficient? Could they be using go away from petrol straight directly to electricity rather than hybrid? Then we put this all together in a format, and it goes to the Environment Agency and gets submitted online. And it's a breakdown of where they are. Now, we were interviewed, audited, I should say, by the Environment Agency with one of our clients, and we were on the phone for a couple of hours, and we passed, and with no problems. A lot of companies had to do remedial action, and what we found out, just generally looking at statistics and stuff like that, is the recommendations we've made or other companies have made. A lot of companies have taken those on board. So in their buildings, they might have changed their light, heating systems. They may have put in new glazing. They may have put sensors. Just various different recommendations, and it's actually quite good to look back on your work and think, yeah, that has really made an improvement to those industries. Because what the thinking behind it was, the biggest companies are going to create the most carbon dioxide. It's going to be more harmful to global warming and climate change. So therefore, we'll focus on the bigger companies. So that's where we are, and that's within the next year. They've got to do a full submission again. EPCs is purely looking at an individual property. There are what's called display energy certificates, which are also a measure of the property's efficiency, but on a different basis. It actually uses the gas and electricity bills to work out how much energy a property is using, whereas an EPC is based basically on a theoretical, a lot of theoretical assumptions. So my belief is that in terms of MEES and the legislation, it shouldn't be based on an EPC, because it's not the best tool to be using to work out how efficient a property is. It should be based more on the display energy certificate. And the accreditation bodies are in discussion at the moment, looking at the viability of EPCs and seeing the future of them and how to improve them to make them more relevant to people and to parties who use them.
Very interesting. Thanks.
Okay, good. Great. Okay, guys. Look, so 2 o'clock nearly. I think we're done. That's great. That's great. So look, thank you very much. Really interesting. I didn't know much about EPCs before, other than that we had to have them.
So, still have to have them.
Yeah, but if anybody wants to talk to Dan or Sivan, please make contact with us, and we'll put you in direct touch, or contact them directly. But that's it. Thanks very much. So
for having you on your show.
Yeah, we'll promote on social media. Everyone can find it. Remember, podcast. If you want to listen to a podcast on the way home, you're able to do so. If you would like a CPD certificate, let us know. We can issue a CPD certificate. But fun enough, most people don't ask for CPD certificates, so they must find what we talk about quite interesting. So there you are. Yeah. Amazing. Okay, good. Thank you very much, guys. We will tell everybody our next guest, which hopefully will be a leading retailer in a couple of weeks' time. One of the few retailers who seems to buck the trend at the moment. So I will hopefully have that sorted out for you shortly. So we'll be in touch. So thank you very much, guys. Thanks very much for joining us. Thanks, Dale.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone.
And thanks, Ed.
Thanks very much.
Have a good weekend. Thanks very much, everyone. Bye.